Good afternoon. It's Sunday. It's Palm Sunday, and it's been an interesting day with the internet in and out around Maryville, or at least in the places I have been. And so we finally managed to get our worship service online this afternoon. And so I hope that you find a time. Maybe you already have, but I hope you have found a time to be able to go in and worship with your family, with your palm branches, with your greenery, celebrating the arrival of the King, and understanding what that arrival meant. The Israelites, the Jewish people, were looking for a king, someone to sit on the earthly throne. They did not realize that Jesus was the eternal King sitting on the heavenly throne. And so they were looking for a king. They got much more than that. But the high celebration moments of Palm Sunday quickly turned into a rough week for Jesus. And so if you're getting my pastor e-note, there is going to be through Holy Saturday, daily meditations and readings on Jesus's last week with some kind of insights that I have that I want to share with you. And so I hope that you receive those and read those. If you do not receive those by email right now, contact the office at Maryville First United Methodist Church and see that you're on the email list. We'll be happy to add you, and you'll get those readings, the devotionals for Holy Week. Tonight, we are in Esther, the book of Esther. I used to laugh and joke about Esther because of the purification time that Esther had before she was able to go before the king to see if she would be chosen by him. But somehow I always thought that it was the cosmetic company. What is it? Estee Lauder? But I don't think Esther really has anything to do with the naming of that cosmetic company. But hey, who knows? So what is it about Esther? You're going to watch the Bible Project video, and you're going to get a really good overview of the reasons that Esther is in Scripture, but also the reason that the name God is not really mentioned throughout the text. So I'm going to do just a brief overview to guide you through chapter to chapter to get a basic understanding of the purpose of the book. The real purpose of the book was to demonstrate God's sovereignty, even if his name's not mentioned. The providence of God is present with us, and we always need to remember that. Things don't happen by coincidence. They happen because God has ordained and laid out the perfect plan, and a lot of things happen because human beings, we're going to get into Job tomorrow night. Things happen because human beings have this chaos. We live in this chaotic kind of a universal understanding, and so God's providence is there. His providence shows up even if God himself is not mentioned in this book. And so the book of Esther was probably written by Mordecai. Some will say we just don't know, and so we don't name it. But some think that it was written by Mordecai simply because of what it says in Esther chapter 9, verse 29, which says, "Then Queen Esther, the daughter of Abihail, let's go with Abihail, Abihail. It's a Jewish name, so I know definitely I'm not saying it correctly. But Queen Esther, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm the second letter about Purim." And so that's why some scholars think that it was Mordecai that wrote this. Some have suggested Ezra or Nehemiah because it's written in the same style as both of those previous books. The setting here, one thing that we need to understand, that although Esther follows Nehemiah in the Bible, its events are about 30 years prior to the recording of Nehemiah. The story is set in the Persian Empire, and most of the action takes place in the king's palace at the Persian capital. Now, if you are a Bible reader and you have memorized some verses, this might be one of the books that you remember. The key verse that comes out of here is chapter 4:14, and you might know this verse even before I say it. But it's Mordecai talking to his niece Esther and encouraging her to go forward to see the king, because it may just be her that saves the nation of Israel from total annihilation. And so in Esther 4 verse 14, for if you remain completely silent about this, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. And every translation that I've read, it kind of has a italicized emphasis on the word such a time as this. And we can look at our life and say, hey, things happened for such a time as this in order for such another thing to take place. And so that's why I don't really believe in coincidences. I believe that things are planned out, and we kind of move in and out of the things that God has planned for things to happen as they were already planned out, whether we play a part or not. And so I believe what Mordecai is saying to Esther is, hey, if you don't act, somebody else might, but here's an opportunity for you, Esther, to step up and save a race of people, to save a nation of people. And so that's just my thoughts on that. Esther is one of only 2 books named for women. Ruth is the other one. The book is unusual in that the original version title, there was no pronoun given to God. And so this caused some church fathers to question whether or not the book of Esther deserved or should be in the canon, because there was no pronoun, nothing listed, no name, no pronoun, no title, nothing directly ascribed to God himself. But when you read through the book of Esther, you get the feel, you get the presence of God working through Esther and through Mordecai to save their people. And for me, that's all about God showing up at such a time as that, when it was needed. And so, if we take a look at chapter by chapter of the book of Esther, we can go through this and see what was happening. God's sovereignty showing up. Esther becomes queen in chapter 1 and chapter 2. The king Artaxerxes was throwing a wild party. I guess he was showing off, and he got mad at his queen and decided that he was just going to select another queen. He had some help of some interesting guys around him that would lead him to do things that he probably wouldn't do on his own if he wasn't partying so much. And so the blueprint breaks this out into four main parts. Chapters 1 and chapters 2, Esther becomes queen, and all the detail that went into Esther becoming queen, all the women that came up to be purified and in order to be chosen. In chapters 3 and 4, there is the movement of the Jews to be threatened. Their very sense of life, and that was Haman. Haman had a conspiracy against the Jews, and Haman was just not a good guy. If we were to take a look at the life of Haman, we may find the word evil written behind him. He was power hungry. He did have some strength, though. Haman's strengths, he achieved great power. He was second in rank to the Persian king Artaxerxes. So he must have had something good going on inside of his character at one time to rise to king. But we know from reading the Kings, the Book of Kings, first and second Book of Kings, we know that you can begin something with good character, but you always don't end up moving through life with integrity and character. So he had some weaknesses. Haman had some weaknesses, and he made some mistakes. The desire to control others and receive honor was his highest goal. He only cared about himself and being pridefully in front of everybody else. And so he wanted to control others. He wanted to be in charge. He was blinded by arrogance and self-importance. He had planned to murder Mordecai, and he even built gallows just for Mordecai. He orchestrated the plan to slaughter God's people throughout the empire, and he got the king to go, okay, hey, yeah, whatever, let's do this. And so it wasn't exactly a good thing for Haman to be so bold and to be so pride-driven, because he did learn some lessons from life, and we can learn some lessons from the life of Haman. One of the lessons we learn is that evil will be punished. Hatred will be punished. God has an amazing record of making evil plans backfire. And so we need to know this is where the sovereignty of God shows up. At such a time as was needed, the evil plan of Haman backfired and allowed Esther to save the nation. Pride and self-importance will be punished just right along with hatred, hating other people, evil, and doing evil things. Pride and self-importance is also one of the 7 deadly sins. We can think about it that way. And also, an insatiable thirst for power and prestige more often than not will bring about self-destruction. And so we have to keep ourselves in check. Our self-importance, our pride, and we have to walk with integrity. We have to be walking in the way of righteousness of God. And so when we think about Haman, we think about what Haman did to threaten the Jews. The key verse that comes out of Esther in regard to Haman and his evil ways is from Esther 3, verses 5 and 6. And the text says, when Haman saw that Mordecai did not bow or pay him homage, Haman was filled with wrath, but he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had told him of the people of Mordecai. Instead, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Artaxerxes. They were the people of Mordecai. And so Mordecai had stepped up and done something good for the king, to protect the king, and nobody wanted to hurt Mordecai, but Haman himself felt that if he couldn't go after Mordecai directly, he would go after an entire tribe of people. And so this is where Haman just fell into this hatred for a people group. Prejudice kind of stepped up. The book of Esther is an example of God's divine guidance and care over us. God's sovereignty and power are seen throughout this book. And although we may question certain circumstances in our lives, we must have faith that God is in control and that God is working both the pleasant and difficult times so that we can serve him effectively. And this is what Mordecai and Esther were all about. Mordecai, full of integrity, always doing the right thing, putting his niece in the right place at the right time. And so the Jews are threatened in chapters 3 and 4. Chapters 5 through 8, Esther begins to intercede on behalf of the Jews. And then in chapters 9 and 10, the Jews are delivered. But along with that, those that were doing evil, they got the just treatment that they deserved, and so there is some very hard things. If you read into chapter 10, you see Mordecai's advancement. Mordecai advances in the ranks. but Haman is pretty much done with, he and his family. And there's some violence in this book, but at the same time, there is the providence of God. And so I encourage you to take your time to read these 10 chapters. If you've seen the movie Esther that came out a few years ago, it kind of moves a little bit away from scripture at some points, I felt, but at the same time, it gives you a good, entertaining view of what Esther is all about. And I encourage you to read it. And if you so desire, mark those moments in the chapters that cause you to go, yes, that's where God is at work. That's where I see the sovereignty of God. And if you see the sovereignty of God in the book of Esther, I encourage you to let us know chapter and verse so that we can discuss it after I post this. So friends, that's kind of a quick overview. I feel like I'm talking fast. It's been one of those days. Just know that I'm praying for you. I'm hoping that you're all doing well. And I'm trusting that there is a light at the end of the tunnel for us where we will be together again soon. Friends, rest this evening. Take care of yourselves, love on your family, and wake up to love God tomorrow and celebrate every day of this week, during this holy week, what God has done for us as we receive the gift of Jesus Christ. Blessings, friends. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.